This video is an introduction to JSON, and it's for Alpha Anywhere developers to introduce you to the concepts in JSON and to show you how JSON can be used both on the server side in Xbasic and on the client side in JavaScript. So in its simplest form, you can just think of JSON as a data interchange format. So let's start out by going to the interactive window in Alpha and play with some Xbasic objects. So I'm going to go here into the interactive window now and define, say, a dot variable. So a dot variable can be thought of as an object. So I'll go here and say dim, say pp as p, and then say pp dot name equals Fred, and pp dot say age equals 30. So this is an Xbasic object now called pp, and we can now use the Xbasic JSON generate function to generate the JSON representation of this object. So I'm going to go here and type in JSON generate of pp, and what I get back here is the JSON representation of this object. So another way of phrasing this would be to say that we've serialized this object to a JSON string. So when we look at the definition of this JSON object here, we see the familiar JSON pattern. So in JSON, objects start with curly brackets. So there's the first, this is the indication that we're now defining an object. So there's the open curly bracket that defines the beginning of the object, and there's the closed curly bracket that defines the end of the object, and then within the object you just have name value pairs. So here's the property name, which is name, followed by a colon, and then followed by the property value, which is Fred. So you can see that in the JSON spec all of the property names are double quoted, and then the property values can either be double quoted if they're strings, or in the case of numbers they would be just simply the number itself, not in quotes. And then you can also encode logical values. So I can go here and say pp dot married equals let's go say true, and then when we generate the JSON from that, we can get here the JSON representation of that, and this has got true over there. So now, just as we can generate JSON from an Xbasic object, we can also go in the opposite direction. In other words, we can instantiate an Xbasic object from a JSON string. So let's go now from the interactive window into an Xbasic script over here. So let's go here and say dim text as C, and then text equals, and we'll use the special angle bracket to indicate that this is a string whose definition expands over multiple lines. So here's our JSON over there, and now let's go here and say something like dim pp2 as p, and then pp2 equals JSON pass, and now text. And then I'm going to just go there and put in a debug1, so we can open the Xbasic debugger and look inside this Xbasic object called pp2. So let's go ahead now and run this. So here's my debugger opening up, and if I type in the debugger pp2, I see that inside the debugger we have an object. We have a property called name, which has a value of Fred, married is true, and age is 30. Now JSON objects can be much more complex than this. They can contain nested objects, and they can also contain arrays. So let's pause now and pick this up in the next video, where we talk about more complex JSON objects. So in the previous video we showed how you can take a JSON string and parse that to get an Xbasic object, and we use the JSON parse function. So now we're going to talk about how JSON objects can be much more complex than this simple object over here, which just has 3 properties and doesn't have any nested arrays or sub-objects. So also I just wanted to mention that all of the properties in this these name value pairs here are delimited with a comma, excepting for the last property. So you can see after the name Fred property there's a comma, and then after age 30 there's a comma, but there's no comma after married true. So let's go now and add another property here. So we'll go there and we'll add another property. So I'm going to go here and type in, say, address, but this time instead of defining a simple string as the address, I'm going to create another object, a nested object. So I'm going to go there and type in a curly bracket and then close curly. So this means that address is now a sub object, and then inside this address object I can say street, and we'll make the street let's go make that, say, main street, comma, and then we'll go here and say number, and we'll say 123, and then we'll go here and we'll type in, say, city, and then we can go here and type in, say, Boston. So now in this case address is a sub-object, but just as address is a sub-object, I could have sub-objects listed inside this address object, and this could go on indefinitely. So objects can get very rich. But now that we've defined this richer object over here using our JSON representation of the object, let's go and parse it now. So there we go, and we can parse it. So when we look inside this Xbasic object pp2, we see that we have name, married, and age, but then address is itself an object, and address has city, number, and street as its sub-properties. So we've shown now that these objects can be more complex. Now let's go and actually create an array. So in this case we've got address is an object here, but we can just as easily continue in our JSON object here and add more properties, and this time we're going to go here and add another property. So we'll go here and type in, say, children. So now we have a new property, but this time instead of the property value being either a string or a number or a logical flag or a sub-object, we're going to make it into an array. So arrays are notated with square brackets. So that's the beginning of the array, and there's the end of the array, and then within the array I can have either just literal values like alpha, beta, gamma, or I can have objects themselves. So let's make this array interesting by putting objects into the array. So we'll go here and we'll say that the first item in the array might be, say, name. So this basically would be the name of Fred's first child. So we'll go here and type in, say, John, and then we'll go here and type in the value, another property. Let's go here and type in, say, age, and then we'll type in, say, 3, and then we'll close curly brackets to indicate that that's the end of the first item in the array. So let's pause now and pick this up in the next video. So we're continuing now with our discussion of the JSON representation of objects, and what we have right now is an array inside this object that has all of the children for this particular person called Fred. So let's go and give Fred another child. So we'll go there and just copy that to the clipboard and then paste, and we'll go here and type in, say, Sally, and then we'll make her 5, and then we'll go and add one more in. And so now this is going to be the last item in this array, so we'll get rid of the trailing comma over there, and then let's go here and just type in, say, Kim, and we'll make her 7. So you can see also that you don't have to put each property on its own line as we did over here. In this case, we've got the name property and the age property on the same line. The key point though is that between each property there's a comma. So you can see here within this object there are commas that delimit each property, and then within this array here, which is indicated by the square brackets, each item in the array is delimited by a comma, but there's no comma for the last item in the array. So now let's go ahead here and execute this code. So now when we look at the Xbasic object PP, we can go here and look at, we can see that we have address, which is an object, so it has sub-properties. Age, married, and name are all just individual properties, but children is an array. So if we click on children, we can see that it's an array that's got 3 items in it, which is correct because that's exactly what we did. And then, for example, if we look at the first item in the array, we see the 2 sub-properties, name and age. So we've now created a pretty complex Xbasic object by taking the JSON representation and parsing it. Now, of course, as we showed earlier, not only can you parse JSON in Xbasic to go from a JSON string to the Xbasic object, but you can also go back in the opposite direction and you can generate JSON from an Xbasic object. So let's go here and say dim text2 as C, and then text2 equals JSON generate, and then type in pp2 over here. And now let's go here and say show var text2 so we can actually see what got generated back. And if we look at our JSON here, we can see that what came out of this JSON generate is something that looks very much like the same string that we initially passed to get our object. So the JSON generate function has some options, like for example over here I can say special flags, which is useful if you're generating JSON that has JavaScript function definitions in it, but we don't need to worry about that right now. And so I'm going to go here and say .f dot, and then I'm going to turn the condense flag on, so .t dot. So now when I look at my JSON, it comes back looking just like a long string of JSON. So in some cases you're going to get your JSON looking like this, and in other cases you're going to get JSON that's nicely formatted. But it turns out that Xbasic has a really nice JSON reformat command as well. So I'm going to go here and say text3 equals JSON reformat of text2, and then let's print out over here text2 plus, say, CRLF4, and then plus also text3. So if we go ahead now and run this, we see basically the JSON in its compact form, it's all of the code on a single line, and then after calling the reformat function, we've got a nicely formatted JSON string over here. So at this point we've shown how JSON can be used to serialize objects in Xbasic, and we've shown how you can generate JSON from an Xbasic object, or how you can parse JSON and get an Xbasic object back. What we're going to do next is show how JSON can be used on the client side, and then finally we're going to show how JSON is very useful to send data back and forth from the server to the client. So let's pause now and pick this up in the next video.